I'm getting a little preachy, I guess, but I'm in that spirit anyway. But there's one last point that I want to make,
Okay.
and this is something that you touch upon in your videos as well, is that I think one of the biggest mistakes in terms of normal people's, take media out of it for a second, because we know what's going on there, we know the spin, but I think even without the media, there's a tendency for a lot of, I think, Western people and they don't know the difference between China before and China now. And they just think of it as all the same thing, right? So, and these are completely two different worlds. These are completely two different systems, two different countries, really, when you're comparing China decades ago and China what it is today, right?
Correct.
And I see it as kind of the growing pains that all nations go through. I don't think you can name a single prosperous nation in the world that did not go through its own turbulent growing pains. So the equivalent would be like if let's say I'm a Chinese person and I've never been to America, and my whole outlook on America was pre-Civil War America. And that's how I thought about America today. I'm like, okay, well, that's how it is. Or if I thought of Germany as like Nazi Germany still, and my whole outlook on Germany was like, oh, it's basically the same as what Nazi Germany was. I'd be ridiculous to think that, right? I'd be so wrong. And I think that's how a lot of people still view China. They don't understand that China has changed so much
100%.
that it's completely not the same system. So when Westerners think of China, they think of, the old school China, and they think of all these turbulent times in China's past, and that's their image of it. So it's that ability to differentiate and to be aware and educated and research enough to know that there's a huge difference between these two.
Big time. That's gonna be a future video on my channel, and just simply titled "Has China Changed?" And talking about from Mao Zedong to Xi Jinping, and this time frame. I mean, China has changed tremendously. And I think, obviously the government has not changed. It has been a one-party state the entire time. That has remained unchanged. And I think, you can make the argument, yes, has Chinese citizens experienced political freedom? Have they experienced some political changes? No, they haven't, right? It's been a one-party state. But when you look at the personal freedoms of Chinese have exploded, in the past 30 years. And it's a much different China and a much different experience. That's how I would answer that question. And again, like I've had people message me, it's like, well, Cyrus, what about the Great Leap Forward? What about the Cultural Revolution? How could you talk about China when it has this history? And to me, it's just such a simple answer to that question. And you already hit it on the head. If you're judging America based on the time that, we had slaves, or Germany as when it was Nazi Germany and, doing the Holocaust, that obviously these were very dark times in these prospective countries. And no less than China. I mean, those were terrible times in China. Those were not good times in China. And that was, bad government policies, bad decisions. There were certainly mistakes made. Even China admits that. I mean, Chinese, many Chinese people, when you ask them, what do you think of, Mao Zedong? A lot of people say he's, 50% right, 50% wrong.
Yeah.
There were some very positive things that he did. There were some big mistakes that he made as well. But again, I really agree with your point. And I like the growing pains. I think every country in the world, goes through those periods. But, you look at since 1979, China has not been in an international conflict. America, I mean, we are constantly spending money on wars. I mean, China, you keep reinvesting into the infrastructure. You look at the high-speed rails in China. You look at it's amazing, when we talk about, again, kind of going back to one of the first points that you made, what's the most important things, these very basic elements: food, shelter, jobs, prosperity, opportunity. And these are the things that China is offering its citizens. Hey, you're not going to have the same level of freedom of speech in China. It will be different, but again, not many people are exactly seeking what you're doing in America. And that's not to say that, I love having freedom of speech here, and it's great. But again, I think for most people, for the majority of people living in China, foreigners included, their quality of life is not really that much different, than living back in their respective countries.